We want to let you know that we will do our best to answer any questions. Kent County Master Gardener volunteers hold a plant sale. The proceeds go to scholarships for Delaware High School seniors and college students who are pursuing a college degree in some area of agriculture. We did not have a plant sale in 2020 due to the pandemic. If you would like to help us continue to offer these scholarships, please consider making a donation. Checks can be made out to Kent County Master Gardeners or KCMG and mailed to the address shown. We thank you for your support. This information will be included in the follow-up email you will receive after the workshop. If you have additional questions, you may call our helpline at 302-730-4000 or email us at kentcountyhelpline@gmail.com. Please check out our webpage on the Delaware State University website for future workshop listings, to register for workshops, or to view our virtual workshop recordings. And don't forget to complete the online evaluation. The link will also be put in the chat box at the end of the presentation. Thank you, and I will turn this over to our presenters at this time. I'm sorry, everybody. I had a little technical difficulties this morning. So I want to welcome all of our participants from all over the country and the world. Please make sure that you put your first and last name in the chat box so that we can keep records for our attendance. And also, we're going to be going through the pre-submitted questions first. But if you have additional questions or you didn't get a chance to pre-submit a question, if you just put those right in the chat box, after we go through the 20 or so questions that we have, we're going to start just taking them from our audience. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Karen with our first question.
Everybody, our first question surrounds a 5-variety grafted cherry tree, and when is it safe to plant? Generally speaking, in our area, and I'm speaking for Delaware, late February throughout March is the best time to plant. Since the plant that you're referring to in your description has been kept indoors since it was purchased, it would probably be advisable to acclimate it to the outdoors by putting it outside during the day, getting it adjusted to some cooler temperatures. That being said, keep in mind where you're going to plant it as well. Cherry trees like a lot of sun, more flowering, more fruit. Be mindful of, if at all possible, sheltering it from strong winds. And it's generally recommended not to fertilize at the time of planting. The Virginia Cooperative Extension, as well as the Penn State Cooperative Extension, have excellent information if you're looking for some evidence-based research online surrounding stone fruit trees. So there you go. There's your cherry tree question.
Okay, thanks, Karen. If you have additional questions about any of these, please be sure to follow up in the chat box with any other further questions. We're going to give this next question to our lawn and soil expert, Steve DiCarlo. So if someone wants to know how to amend their soil in Sussex County.
Well, Sussex, southern Kent and Sussex, except for the shore points, the soil is probably came from farm. It used to be a farm in most cases. So to amend the soil, if you know what the last crop planted was, if it was corn, then you're going to need a lot of nitrogen. If it was soybeans, then you're not. The only way to really tell is to get a soil sample done. For lawn soil or for flower and vegetable gardens, you'll want to take 4 inches or 6 inches for the gardens. The soil sample can be done by mail now. So if you go to the websites that were shown earlier, you'll be able to Master Garden websites. You'll be able to find how to do and take a soil sample and get it processed. Once you get it, you can look at the results, and if you have any questions, send them off to the helpline, and we'll get them and take a look at them. But it will tell you what your soil needs as far as the amount of nitrogen, if you need lime, any other of the 16 different chemicals that plants need. It also depends, to amend your soil, you also have to take a look at what it is you're trying to grow. Are you trying to grow a lawn? Or are you trying to grow, I saw a question earlier about raspberries or blueberries. They need more acidic soil. So again, you need to have your soil tested to see where you go from. And then you need to understand what it is that you're going to plant and what that particular plant needs, whether it's anything from squash or peas or lettuce, or fescue, a tall fescue lawn. They all have slightly different needs. One generality you can make is the fact that most soils in Delaware do need organic matter. Of all the test results that I've seen, they usually come up short on the amount of organic matter. So when in doubt, add organic matter to your garden. That's about the best answer I can give you.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.
Let's move on to question 3 now.
Question 3 is Karen again, asking about row covers. And Debbie was kind enough to give us a photo here of a row cover on the right. For those of you who aren't familiar with floating row covers, these are draped directly over the plants. There's pros and cons about them. Early in the season, late in the season, they do provide some frost protection. They help to aid in the plant establishment and growth. Why? Because underneath the row covers, you'll have increased temperatures, you'll have increased humidity. Physically, they will shield from wildlife like deers or, I share my garden with a lot of wildlife, so some of the protection is good, and they can be reused. So you have your initial investment, and they can be reused, but there's also some negatives about them. They're protecting from the deers, but they might be trapping insects underneath them. It can be difficult if you have taller plants, and if there are plants of any variety that require pollination, obviously bees cannot get to them because you have them covered. So that being said, row covers are super great for warm weather crops, tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, and we're entering that season relatively soon. I'm starting my seeds next week, actually. And you can cover these types of vegetables as soon as they are planted, but then you want to remove the covers when they begin to flower so they will get pollinated. For things like lettuce, spinach, arugula, radishes, carrots, some of the Asian greens, broccoli, radishes, cauliflower, even snap beans. Those are cool season crops. So you want to leave a row cover on from about March to May. And then again, mid-September to Thanksgiving. Again, we're looking at the beginning and the end of the seasons where the temperature gets a little bit more variable. Going back to what Steve said before, something like strawberries, again, strawberries, you would need to uncover, and I could never successfully grow strawberries because I am feeding my entire neighborhood of squirrels and whatever. But they require insects to be pollinated. So they need that pollination to produce fruit. So you have to be mindful of what you're planting and where you're planting and the time of the year you're planting. And again, some great resources. University of Maryland Cooperative Extension has some great information about row covers as well. And the next question, I think, goes to Debbie.
Yes, I had this question about cover crops, and I do grow crops. I love to grow cover crops. They are great for protecting your soil over the off season, keeping it from just being fallow and not doing anything. They cover the soil. They also, if you have legumes like peas, or I like to grow crimson clover, they actually are legumes that put the nitrogen back into the soil. The question I believe she was asking was, what do I do now that I've grown my cover crop over the winter? And she has a variety of different things growing in her cover crop. So you grow different cover crops for actually different purposes. But the best thing I would recommend doing in this, and she's talking about no-till, but I know someone who doesn't do anything except mow it down and leave the cuttings laying on the soil and letting the plants continue to grow. Since I do a cover crop in a small area, which is actually in a raised bed, I can't do that because it takes up too much of my growing space for the crops that I want. So what I do is, in addition to cutting it down, I actually go into the top couple inches of soil and turn it over and just incorporate it into the top few inches of soil. And what this does is actually lets that material decompose, and it becomes like a green manure. A lot of these cover crop plants have a lot of nitrogen that they actually put back into the soil. So if you do that in the spring, you need to wait about 2 weeks after you do that for it to decompose and amend your soil. This is a great way to improve the soil structure, adding this organic matter back into the soil. So I hope that answers your question about cover crops. There's a lot of different things you can find out, and I can provide some resources later, because a lot of what you do depends on the purpose and which cover crop you're growing. So I hope that answered your question, and we are ready to go on to number 5, which is another lawn question for Steve.
I've looked at the series of pictures of this, and my first impression is that it's environmental. We've had a really wet winter. I wanted to ask the person who sent in this question and picture whether there was any puddling in the backyard, or do they have erosion problems? You can't tell from this picture whether we're on a short, any kind of slope, but it looks like water has sort of washed through this. And in this past year, we haven't had a lot of snow, although I think there may be some in the top end of this picture. But what we had is a lot of moisture and freezing temperatures at night, which will heave the ground. Most of the lawns here in Delaware do tend to turn a brownish in the wintertime anyway. But if you add on top of that, water, and we've had more rain this year than our average for the entire year over the last 50 years, you're going to get the freezing temperatures at night, melting during the day, and then any runoff from during the day is going to cause what looks like to me as a washout. So that's what I think. There are other reasons. It could be moles going after grubs, but in the pictures, I don't see any tunneling. So I'm going to answer separately, because I don't think the person who sent this question in is on board with us today. So I'm going to send questions off to her about the slope or puddling or drainage in this particular area. But my first impression from seeing these pictures is it's environmental.
Okay, that's great, Steve. We're so glad you're here to help with this. We were all discussing this earlier, and the person who submitted this question actually sent me a message this morning, and she was very upset that she wasn't going to be able to make it. So we're
I
going to
have
try
it. I got the email, so
Okay.
I will answer her directly.
Awesome. We're going to try to follow up with her because, you know, we want to be able to help everybody we can with whatever, in whatever way we can, because we were tossing around the idea that it was possibly moles, but we will further investigate that. Yeah, because it's hard to see because you can't really be there. With
I just done, in the pictures that I saw, I tried to bring them up and I really didn't see any tunneling. And
Yeah.
you will see the tunneling. But again, if you have water laying there, even just below the surface, and you get, as we have had, a warmer day and a freezing night, it will heave the soil.
Okay.
So
Well,
I
we'll
mean,
find that out from her for sure. Yeah.
I'll follow up with an email.
Okay, appreciate that, Steve. All right, our next question is going to Carla.
Okay. The question is, what is good native ground cover for a shady area? My recommendations are Pachyra aurea, which is also known as golden ragwort. It spreads fairly quickly. It will bloom in about a month with really pretty little daisy-like yellow flowers. The ground cover itself is only a few inches tall. The flowers will raise up to about maybe a foot at the most, I'd say. And it does bloom for a fair long time. The other thought was for Tiarella or foam flower. There are two different types. One is a runner and the other is a clumper. I believe the cordifolia is the runner. It will spread throughout shade. They like moist soil, but they will take a little bit of drought if needed. The third one that came to mind was chrysogonum, which is also known as green and gold. And that is a very effective ground cover. It spreads pretty quickly. It also, in the spring, will bloom little yellow flowers. I would say that it probably spreads faster than the other two. If you're looking for a large area to cover, that would really work. But of the three, I find the Pachyra aurea to be, you know, just the best plant all around. It looks good. In a mild winter, it stays evergreen. Mine didn't brown out at all this winter. And they're just really nice looking plants. They bloom for a decent amount of time. They bloom probably longer than the chrysogonum. They can be found at our plant sale. Other places that you could find them are usually places where you can find native plants. Let's see. There is a type of sedum, I believe it's sedum tenuifolium, which is a woodland type sedum, and it will spread, but honestly, my favorite is the Pachyra aurea. And that rounds up my top three of ground covers.
And I want to plant all of those, Carla.
And I have them.
and I will be talking to you.
Okay.
Thank you. And you also get question number 7.
Okay. Pruning to be done in the spring. Before the leaves come out, before bud break, now is probably about the best time for things like pear trees, dogwoods, they can all be pruned late winter, early spring before it really warms up. Don't wait until the leaves start coming out, then it's a little late. What should be pruned before blooming? Anything that blooms, let's see, the rule of thumb being, if it's blooming in the spring, you want to prune it in the fall. And if it blooms in the summer, you can prune it in the spring. That's a general rule of thumb. So plants that, you know, like your forsythia or, let's see, of course my mind will go blank. Things that, your spring blooming shrubs, Japanese quince, those kinds of things, they should probably be pruned in the fall because they're going to set their buds on the old wood. The plants that can be pruned after blooming, okay, like azaleas and rhododendrons, for instance, they should be pruned right after they bloom because they're going to set their buds in about a month after blooming, and you don't want to prune them too late or you're going to be pruning off the buds. We'd had also a question about hydrangeas. Your hydrangeas, like your mop heads, the macrophyllus, your lace caps, a lot of serratas are lace caps, quercifolia or your oak leaf hydrangea, they bloom on old wood, so you should not prune them too late in the season. Just right after the flowers fade. The types of hydrangeas that bloom later, for instance, the paniculatas like Limelight or PG, or the arborescens, which by the way is a native azalea, native to the eastern part of the United States. And that would be like Annabelle. Those should be pruned late winter because they'll bloom on new wood. So you can prune them now and that'll give them time when spring starts, they'll start pushing out new growth and their buds will be on that. Actually, hydrangeas don't really need to be pruned much at all. Mostly you want to snip off your old dead flowers. Don't go down too far. You don't want to go down into where the new buds are coming up. Just prune off the dead stuff. If you need to prune them because they're getting too large, you can go all the way down, take a few of the oldest canes, the oldest wood, and cut that off at ground level. You'll always want to take off spindly or dead wood. Those can be pretty much cut out anytime. Things that cross and rub, you know, like when the sticks are crossing and rubbing on each other, you want to prune some of that out so that it doesn't damage the tree or the shrub. So I think that about wraps up pruning.
Awesome, Carla. That helps me a lot too. We're going to go on to our next question, number 8, which goes to our Master Gardener, Linda.
Yeah, what should I plant to attract pollinators to my garden? First, I just want to clarify what is a pollinator, and it's a lot of different pollinators. We have bees, butterflies, bats, beetles, birds, flies, moths, and the wind. So you want to have plants that are going to benefit all of them if you can. Of course, leading with native plants like your perennials, your goldenrod, sneezeweed, blue lobelia, golden ragwort, salvia, violets. And don't forget your trees, they're critically important, particularly white oak, pawpaw, beautyberry, fothergilla, wild cherry. Then you have asters, milkweed, coreopsis, sunflowers, trumpet creeper, clematis, and then you have a whole series of butterflies that like things like parsley, dill, fennel, and then rosemary has beautiful flowers on it that pollinators like as well. There are a number of resources that you can go to, and I don't have them up here, but we can provide that to you. One of them is www.pollinator.org, and they have a whole list of plants and trees for our particular area. You put your zip code in and it'll tell you what you should be planting. There's also the Natural Resources Defense Council, that's nrdc.org. They have some excellent literature. Then we also have a booklet that comes out through the University of Delaware. And then there's another one with the Delaware Nature Society.org. But we'll try to provide these website information to you. Okay.
Okay, awesome, Linda. My best way of attracting pollinators, actually, I grow garlic chives, and I don't know if anybody's ever grown that. But I was so surprised, the crazy, I mean, there's like no bloom without a pollinator on it in the summer, so.
Can you either repeat those websites or put them in the chat right now?
Actually, Claire, we can, when we do a follow-up email, we'll send you all kinds of resources.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's the easiest way.
I know. All right. So I believe you also get question 9, Linda.
Right. The question was, is it okay to cut back my tulips and other bulb plants after they bloom? And actually it's not. Bulbs are rather unique in that after they bloom, they start building up their resources for their blooming purposes for the next year and it comes through the greenery that's left on them after they bloom. So you want to leave that on the plants until it's completely shriveled up and you can actually just tug on it very lightly and it'll pull away from the plant. And then you know it's time to clean up. Now they do tend to get a little ugly looking when they start turning yellow, and there's a number of things you can do, such as planting other things in amongst them like hostas, daylilies, geraniums, things like that will kind of disguise the greenery that's no longer green. And I find braiding the foliage to be helpful too. It kind of like puts it in a neat package and it doesn't have this look where it's all messy and helter-skelter. I think you'll find any one of those are an excellent solution.
Okay, thank you, Linda.
Mm-hmm.
I think you also get the next question. You just wanted to get it over with all at once, didn't you?
Yeah. Hummingbirds. When should I put out my hummingbird feeder and what type of nectar do you recommend using? Well, actually, I further researched it. I've been watching hummingbirds and paid a lot of attention to it over the years. But they're actually saying now on this one website, it's rubythroat.org, which is the most common hummingbird that we get in our area, that there are a lot of early migrators that start moving up as early as mid-March. And they say it would not hurt to put out 1 or 2 feeders with just a very little bit of the nectar in it, just in case you have a passerby so that they can refuel on their way. But as a general rule, in this area, they start arriving in early to mid-April. Sorry about that, folks. I turn it off and it doesn't matter. Yeah, early to mid-April, usually around, I found the 17th or the 18th of April. So you'll want to put the feeders out long before you see the hummingbirds, because a lot of times, like I say, they're coming by and you don't even have a chance to see them, so that they'll have that opportunity. The best nectar is using a quarter cup of plain white sugar and a cup of boiling water. This will provide them with all the nutrient that they need. And please don't use the colored mixes that they have, or feel like you need to be adding any kind of coloration to it. That's not necessary. They ask that you leave the feeders up at least until October 1st, and they recommend at least leaving one feeder up until Thanksgiving, because there's also a lot of late migrating hummingbirds that are heading south in the fall. One thing I do want to stress is that although you have your hummingbird feeders out, for hummingbirds, they sometimes do tend to attract bees and wasps. Please, whatever you do, do not spray with an insecticide or pesticide or anything like that around the hummingbird feeders, or for that matter, on any of your flowers, because this is very toxic to the hummingbirds. You'll want to use just natural stuff, or just pick the bugs off yourself. One thing that they do suggest if you're having a problem with wasps and bees is to get a little shallow saucer and put a 1-to-1 mixture of sugar and water in it, and set it out someplace away from your hummingbird feeder. And this will attract the wasps and the bees, and hopefully divert them from bothering you at your hummingbird feeder. Please remember to change your hummingbird feeders out and wash them routinely. When it gets very hot out, you'll want to do that at least once a week, preferably twice a week. They recommend using a mild solution of water and vinegar to clean them, and get yourself a good brush to scrub them out, because there is a little fungus that could start growing inside the hummingbird feeders, which is not a good thing. And I think that's everything that I have for you. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Thanks, Linda. That was great. I do have a hummingbird feeder, so I am going to follow your expert advice. Our next question, we go back to Karen.
So our next question surrounds non-native plants. We were asked, should we remove all non-native plants? And the answer is no. And just as a point of clarity, I wanted to define and explain what the difference is and why we say no. Native plants are plants that occur naturally in your area. And through your local cooperative extensions, you will find, I am sure, lists available of plants that have originated in your area and support the surrounding habitat. Not just plants, but trees and the like as well. That being said, non-native, as you see here in this question, is exactly the opposite. Those are plants, trees, what have you, that do not occur naturally in your area. Invasive, when we use the term invasive, what we're talking about are plants that outcompete another species, and that results in damage to the ecosystem. Invasive plants can be native or non-native. So it gets a little tricky. But I have non-natives in my garden, and I have natives in my garden. We just encourage you to support local ecosystems. You know, Linda just spoke to hummingbirds, bees, pollinators. So if you're able to support with some native plants, absolutely. But, you know, it's okay if you have some non-native plants. There's no plant police that are going to come and get you. And our next question goes to Carla.
Before we go off of this question, Karen, I did want to mention that the Delaware legislature just put out a list of, not sure exactly what it was. Who was telling me about that?
Invasive
Yeah,
plants.
the new list of the invasive plants. So if you're not sure if something you have is considered invasive or not invasive in Delaware, we'll try to give you that list in our follow-up email also.
And what the bill does is it just prevents any companies or nurseries from selling those invasive plants after a certain date. So there's a list. I think there's 36 different plants on that list that they're sending out. But we can try to send that. Do you want to send that whole bill to them as well, Debbie, or just the list?
Whatever you think we should do, it's fine.
Okay.
I know there's probably people here that aren't from Delaware, but they might still be interested.
Yeah, I have the link if you all need it, but it can be challenging to find native plants. I know I find it challenging sometimes, but if you peek around and you do some word of mouth in your local area or with your cooperative extension master gardeners, I'm sure they could point you in the right direction.
Okay, we're going to go on ahead and plunge forward with question 12. Back to Carla.
Okay. So the question is, when can I bring out plants that I've been overwintering indoors? I would say after the last frost, when the weather has warmed up to at least around 50 degrees or warmer at night. The reason, of course, is that here they've been in your nice warm house and it's quite a shock to go outside. So what you want to do is just bring them out gradually, put them in the shade. I'd say for the first week at least, bring them out maybe for a couple hours, set them in the shade, nice warm day. Let them start to get used to the brighter light because even the shade is brighter than what is in our house for the most part. So you'll want to bring them out gradually over probably about 2 weeks. If they nighttime temperatures, bring them out for the day for like the first couple weeks, and then bring them out, let them sit out in the shade at night as well. For another week or so. If the weather is going to take a dip in the temperature, you'll want to bring them back into, say, your garage or something, just to protect them. And then gradually let them get a little bit more sun, maybe just an hour or two morning sun, just to work them up gradually to getting outside. That said, a lot of your houseplants can be brought outside. I found out recently that brugmansias and daturas, also known as angel trumpets, actually like full sun. And I brought them out. I have 2 of them. I brought them out last summer and they did really well. It was the first time one of them had ever really bloomed so profusely. I was impressed. But you can bring out Christmas cactuses, things like that, set them in the shade. But, and the reverse is true. When the weather starts getting colder, I'd say, before it really gets into the 40s, you're going to want to take a look at your plants, make sure there's no bugs on them, no little spiders, no tree frogs, hitchhikers, things like that, and start bringing them in gradually to get them used to the indoors again. A lot of times, especially when you're bringing them back in, they will drop their leaves because it is a bit of a change for them. Not to worry, they'll grow more leaves and acclimate again. So I think that answers that.
Okay, thanks, Carla. We're going to go on to the next question. And Steve, if you'd like to tackle this, we have another long question for you.
Lawn care in the spring. Generally speaking, most lawns, you'll want to put down a pre-emergence for the crabgrass sometime around the time the forsythia blooms, where the ground temperature gets to 50 degrees. That's generally speaking the case. In Delaware, many people lime in the spring, but this again depends on the results of the soil sample. You want to make sure the pH in your soil of your lawn is balanced. You want to be pH between 6 and 7. If you don't or can't or don't want to do a soil sample, try a pH kit, try to get into the ballpark. Because the pH determines how effective any applications of nitrogen are going to be, and some other nutrients be in your lawn. You don't want to waste money. So after a pre-emergent, you may want to do some fertilizing. This would wait at least until the lawn temperature or the ground temperatures at above 55 degrees. There's a website, it's called Delaware Environmental Observation System, DEOS. I have the website. It tracks at various reading stations the ground temperature. You can look at that website and find out actually when the temperature is going to be up. I'm too cheap to go out and buy a ground thermometer. So, so I kind of use that plus what begins to bloom. Also, probably a month to 6 weeks after you put a pre-emergent down, you may want to put down a broadleaf treatment. There are some products that are both broadleaf and fertilizer, a weed and feed. This might be appropriate, say a month to 6 weeks after you put a pre-emergent down. Generally speaking, I don't fertilize very much in the spring. I generally do my fertilization in the fall. I have found that the more fertilizer you use, the faster your grass grows, and the more you have to mow it. I'm getting lazy in my old age, so I don't like to mow a lot. Plus, I live on a pond, and I'm very mindful of what runs off my lot into that pond. So I keep I do not use anything with phosphorus in it, and I keep the nitrogen to a minimum. I may not have the greenest lawn, but I don't have too many weeds. So, this is about all I can think of in the spring. Again, just to summarize, liming usually takes 4 to 6 months to be effective. That's why you would lime in the spring and reap the benefits in the fall when you do your seeding. So generally speaking, we're killing weeds in the spring, doing some fertilization to help root and blade growth. And then in the fall, we'll do our overseeding and the bulk of our fertilization. Putting your lawn to bed, some of the experts say the last thing to do is to use a pre-emergent, and this would keep down the winter annuals and things like annual ryegrass. Okay, I think I covered most of it, right? Any questions?
We'll probably have some more questions about this, but we're going to wait till we get through the next few slides, and then we'll just close the PowerPoint and take questions from the field, if that's okay, all at once. So I'm sure you're going to get some more long questions then. So going on, I am actually going to take this question. This is a common problem of spots on your lawn, and you may see spots on lawns or other areas that are look like dead grass, and the spot will be surrounded by a ring of green, very healthy looking grass. And what's actually causing this, believe it or not, is dog urine. What happens when there's like a lot of common myths about dog urine in lawns. A lot of the myths are that that it's the pH of the dog's urine that's killing the grass, which is a myth. The pH of the urine is very similar to the pH of anything on the grass. It's right in there, and it's not that. What actually happens is dogs are carnivorous animals, and the proteins that they take in create the urea that's in their urine, which is a high concentration of nitrogen. The nitrogen in their urine is actually over fertilizing the grass in these spots and causing a nitrogen burn. Just the same thing that would happen if you accidentally spilled too much of your nitrogen fertilizer in one spot. It would burn the grass. So it's burning the grass right in the center, and yet outside of that, it's actually where it's more diluted, it's actually fertilizing the grass and making it grow greener. Another thing that can happen is, well, this is really more common with large dogs, which is what my dogs are. So they will do this if they pee in the same spot repeatedly. It'll cause that damage. Just a little bit here and there is not going to damage anything. It needs to be concentrated and repeated. Which dogs will do. They'll go back to the same spot and use the same spot. And, you know, if you have two dogs, they'll both go to the same spot too. So, so that's what's causing this problem. Now what to do about it? Some other myths are that female dog urine does it more than male dog urine, which is actually not true. Their urine is the same concentration of nitrogen. It's just the way that they urinate that's different. Males tend to sprinkle it around and all over the place, and females tend to squat in one place. So that's why you're more likely to see this kind of damage from female dogs. Also, how do you prevent this? Talk about prevention, and we'll talk about cure. Prevent this, water is the best solution to dilute this. So if you're walking your dog in the yard or you're following it around, if you see it urinate in a certain spot, just sprinkle a little water on there, pour a little water on there. It'll dilute the urine, and there will be no problem. And you can also, there's a lot of myths about what you feed your dog, and we don't recommend giving any supplements to your dogs at all without checking with your vet, because a lot of these things can cause kidney damage and those kinds of problems with dogs. So check with your vet. And if you, another myth is that you should give your dog more salt. Giving the dog more salt just makes them drink more water. So the key is water. If your dog drinks a lot of water, of course, its urine will be more dilute and you won't have these problems. So now what do you do about it if you've already got the brown spot? Well, it's likely that this grass is not totally dead and will grow back, especially if it's a small spot. Just leave it alone and let it fill in. If it's not growing back, you can actually just kind of, loosen up the dead soil in that area and mix a little grass seed in with a little bit of soil and spread it over that spot and water it and let it grow back in. And also I want to mention that fescue grasses, which are very common in Delaware, are actually more resistant than your bluegrasses or other forms of grasses. So I have dogs. This was of particular interest to me. So I'm sorry if you don't have a dog, but that doesn't mean a dog will never visit you. So with that being said, we're going to move on and turn the next question over to, I guess it's me on the next one again. All right. This question was actually submitted by someone, several pictures, and she also sent us a picture of the animal that did this that had been killed, and I didn't want to put the dead animal picture in my PowerPoint. So this is a hole with a little bit of discussion. We have decided that this is most likely caused by a rabbit. I have rabbits. This is in a raised bed, and I do have rabbits that dig and actually make nests and have baby bunnies in my raised beds. So I leave them alone because I don't mind them. I share with nature. But if you don't want rabbits digging in your beds, you can use some fence. Make sure that you dig down and put some chicken wire or fence down in the ground to keep them from digging under, and also make it at least 2 feet high. I did some other research on how to keep rabbits out that doesn't actually harm them, how to kind of deter them. Other than a fence, you can put some things out there that rabbits don't like the smell of. One of them is human hair. So you put a little hair out there, they smell it and they will leave. Dried sulfur or small bags of soap shavings will work. Some plants that you can plant that will deter rabbits: garlic, onions, wormweed, and my favorite is marigolds. I have tons of marigolds and I saved the seeds, so I'm happy to share if anybody wants any marigold seeds for your garden. Another suggestion I found was to put like sweet gumballs in the soil that will kind of like, they'll start to dig and then they'll get, just a little stick and they'll go dig somewhere else. Sweet gumballs, prickly rose canes, or holly branches you can use to deter rabbits from digging. In Delaware, it's probably a rabbit, but there are animals in different parts of the country that I want to mention that also dig in your garden. So some of the other possibilities could be moles that we talked about earlier. Squirrels, both ground squirrels and tree squirrels will dig in gardens. Skunks, and then rabbits. And then in other parts of the country, not in Delaware, you might have gophers digging in your garden. So those are some other animals, but we believe that this was caused by a rabbit. Okay, and this question is going to Linda.
Actually, Steve addressed the dry leaf mulch very nicely, but I could add just a few things to point out that, one, leaves are not litter. Actually, the leaves are food and shelter for many of the pollinators that we have and that we want to try and help. And they recommend that you don't rake your leaves up in the spring until about mid-April or May. For some of us, that's a little hard to do, but they say the rule of thumb is when it's safe to plant tomatoes outside, plant tomato seeds outside, it's safe to rake your leaves, because then the insects that are living in the leaves have left. A lot of your bees, including bumblebees, are they dwell in the ground over winter, and this is if you're taking the leaves away too soon, then these insects won't be coming back. There's some excellent literature on this made available by the Xerces Society at xerces.org. And again, we'll provide that information to you on that website as well. And that's what I have.
Okay, and let's see, the next question was about strawberries. And this is going to depend on how your strawberries are grown. But in Delaware, it's pretty much about time to uncover your strawberries. If you covered them for the winter with straw, and they recommend about 4 inches, you can check them. And if it's starting to warm up outside and you're starting to see the little yellow leaves form, you can uncover them. But what you should do is take that straw and kind of put it to the side. If you have rows, move it over into the row between your rows of strawberries. And then if you watch the forecast and you're going to get frost or a cold night, you want to go out there and recover them until the chances of frost are past. The other good thing is to do is keep that straw around, and it'll actually, once you're done covering the strawberries, use it underneath to keep the strawberry plants off of the ground and keep them from getting more diseases. Also, we had a recommendation that if they're new plants that you just planted last year, you might want to give them a little bit more time to be protected. And then, but if they're mature plants that you've had for a while, then you can wait till pretty close to now to start uncovering them. But just take a peek under that mulch and see if you're starting to see any growth happening. And then, of course, you want them to get uncovered and get the sunlight. Okay, we're going to go on to Megan's going to talk about asparagus with you.
Sure. So this question was brought up, when should I expect my asparagus to come up? So this is kind of a tricky question. Asparagus is a perennial. However, you should not harvest your asparagus within that first year, but you can expect your asparagus to come up in the latter part of April into May. That's when, the soil temperature is warm enough and you'll see them kind of come up, and they're so quick, like you've got to really be on it. They're actually really amazing to watch grow just because of how fast they shoot up out of the ground. But I never recommend harvesting within your first year because the crown really needs all the nutrients it can get to start to develop. A lot of recommendations are not even to harvest after your third year. So you want to wait until you have really strong stands of asparagus before you start your harvest. Most asparagus can live about 15 years before it needs to be redone. But I know that with my asparagus, I'm in my fourth year, so I'm hoping to be able to get some good harvesting dates this spring. And you also want to apply some compost and fertilizer in the spring when your plants first start shooting up. So that's what I have about asparagus.
There you go.
Okay, we are going to, well, we're just speeding through these questions.
You're
We're
going
going
to
to go
me.
on and let Carla tackle this one.
Okay, so here's a picture of a bunch of bulbs that one of our homeowners had found in their lawn. She says they don't smell like onions or garlic. I would say, looking at them, that these are grape hyacinths. You can see the leaves, how they're kind of curved. They've got like a little ridge in the middle. That's what grape hyacinths look like. And within, I guess, the next month, if you were to look down in the middle of the foliage, way down, you will start to see the flower starting to come up, little blue flower. They probably ended up in the lawn either by a squirrel replanting some, or possibly the seeds just, the way that grape hyacinths form their seeds, it's a little seed head, and there's little black seeds in like a little cup. And if possibly somebody or something has gone and brushed against it, the seeds will fling out. And that is a possibility as to how they ended up in the lawn. Personally, I love grape hyacinths. It's my thought that you can never have too many spring blooming bulbs. So, you can either replant them in your garden. They will spread, but not extensively, I've never found. They say that they are deer and rabbit resistant, although frankly, I think my deer didn't read that book. So the one way that you will probably find out is grape hyacinths will tend to put up their foliage in the fall, and it overwinters, and then in the spring it disappears as the flowers come up. Then about a few weeks after they're done flowering, the foliage turns yellow and disappears, and it comes back in the fall again. If you don't like them in your lawn and you don't want them at all, just dig them out. Just make sure you get in all of the bulbs. And just do whatever you want with them. But personally, I think they're beautiful. And that's about that.
Thanks, Carla. She was actually the hero of this question because we were all looking at this and saying, those look like onions. Those look like onions. And Carla's like, oh no, those aren't onions. Those are grape hyacinths. So thank you, Carla, for being the expert on those. So we're going to go on to question 20, and Karen is going to tackle this one.
Well, there's really nothing to tackle here. The question is, where can I find a gardening calendar? As you all know, we support evidence-based resources, and here in Delaware, the University of Delaware, you see a lovely picture of the propagation calendar here. It includes a harvesting calendar as well. It's actually a 5-page document that has a lot of great information, also about succession planting, and we'll provide you with that link. I know there are an awful lot of other resources out there, but I encourage you all to look at your regional cooperative extensions because that's really the primary site where you're going to find the most accurate information.
Okay. And if you're in Delaware, of course, that will be the University of Delaware planting calendar. Okay, and those were all what we had for pre-submitted questions. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to show you that we are not recommending any particular products or stores. We don't do that. So we just can give you examples and let you choose. And also that we are an equal opportunity provider. So I am actually going to get out of this PowerPoint so that we can see everybody's faces. And I believe that Cheryl Fisher, our Master Gardener, has been collecting your questions from the chat box. So we're going to turn it over to her and let her read the questions, and then whoever of us feels like we're most capable of providing an answer, or even if you as a participant, this is your special area and you know the answer, well, we certainly won't mind this discussion time for sharing. So I'm going to go ahead and let Cheryl ask away.
Okay, good afternoon. We do have a couple of questions. The first one is it still too cold to plant peas? Did you hear the question?
Yes, I'm not a pea planter. Anybody else
Okay.
familiar with pea planting?
I would say that Linda or Debbie would be the best ones on that.
Actually, it's probably the right time to plant. You could have actually planted them a couple weeks ago. So yeah, put them out.
I would agree with you on that, Linda.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go ahead and go out there and plant them right now. Right as soon as you get done with this presentation.
They actually say you can plant them sometimes as early as late February. So, you know, I've never planted them that early, but usually it's the early part of March.
Okay. The next question is, what is the minimum spacing for raspberry plants? What is the minimum spacing between raspberry plants?
Does anybody here plant? I have some raspberries, but I only have one plant, so its spacing is infinite. I'm not sure if any of you guys know what that actually is recommendation is, but if nobody here knows, we will take this down and we will definitely find out for you what the recommendation is on that.
3 to 4 feet apart looks to be about the common recommendation for raspberries. I know that at Sork we have a little raised bed that has raspberry plants in it, and you know we have, I think in that small area we have 4 raspberry plants, and you know we use actually wire to keep them up off the ground because they'll just come right down and then start new shoots. So
Yeah, Yeah, I was looking up as well. I'm seeing 1.5 to 3 feet. Of course, it depends upon the species you've got. They don't do well in clay soil, and I know here in Delaware in some areas we have some clay soil, so be mindful of that as well.
I know they do spread fairly rapidly.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Okay. Another question. Someone has an, what is this? How to use an attached greenhouse. So what are the best food producing plants that she can grow in containers in a greenhouse? She really doesn't want an outdoor garden.
I would think lettuce would be good.
Well, it might, eventually, I think it's going to get a little too hot in a greenhouse, unless it's an unheated greenhouse. Probably, well, you could use grow bags if you want to grow them in containers, and then in a greenhouse, you're going to have magnified heat. So things like peppers, tomatoes, eggplants would do really well in there. Yeah, they might be a little bit too hot, but that's probably what. Yeah, Megan?
Well, that's what I was going to say. You know, the great thing with containers is you can move them in and out. You know, they're able to be moved around, and you know, your greenhouse on a nice sunny day is going to be way too hot for pretty much for any type of vegetable in the heat of the summer.
Right.
So, you know, having a greenhouse is nice for season extension, but you know, you can move that container in and out. And you can even do some containers where you plant, you know, multiple, you know, like say you want to do a pizza, you know, container where you can plant some tomatoes and some basil and, you know, do little companion planting. So that's nice if you just need small amounts.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. I also think it's important to keep in mind there's different types of greenhouses, and we really don't know specifically, is it a freestanding structure? It is a lean-to. So there's a lot of variables that come into play. Even the base, is it dirt? Is it stone? Is it, I mean, I've seen some places that actually had a concrete poured, which is going to radiate the heat even more. So I think there's a couple of variables that come into play that as well to be mindful of.
And the follow-up question to that was, are there any sources to teach her how to use the greenhouse? Any sources on how to manage a greenhouse?
And just so you guys know, it's a concrete floor and it's built up attached to the house. It's 10 by 20. It's huge. It has like sprinkler systems and heat and fan lights. And I don't know anything about gardening. And last year I grew about 500 basil plants because I didn't know what I was doing. So they all grew fine, but I have no clue how to use it.
You could go volunteer working at a farm that has a greenhouse, and you probably learn. Maybe the manufacturer of the greenhouse would have some type of literature that they could suggest you refer to.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, the University of Georgia, actually, their cooperative extension has a lot of information about what they call hobby greenhouses versus commercial greenhouses that you might find helpful as well. Again, I would suggest you look at cooperative extensions. Even the University of Massachusetts, although it's outside of our region, you know, I don't know where you live, speaks to a lot of hobby greenhouses. And there's a lot involved between irrigation and, you know, pests. You can still get pests in greenhouses. So I would suggest looking at your regional cooperative extension, and I would venture to guess that they probably also have some resources that you could reach out to about specific questions in your region.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm here in Kent County. Thank you.
Yep. There's actually quite a few books too on, you know, just greenhouse manuals. I just typed in, you know, greenhouse manuals for beginners, and a lot of things typed up or came up. So especially for extension services, if you want to look through, just because you live in Delaware doesn't mean you can't kind of steal some information from Pennsylvania or where, you know, what have you.
Okay. Next question. What native plants can I use to benefit wildlife habitat in a rain garden?
Oh, believe it or not, am I like I'm just being a bit of a jerk with this, aren't I? But I actually have a spreadsheet with butterfly gardens, sensory gardens, and rain garden plants. And I think it was the Delaware, oh, Megan, what was it? The Delaware Naturalists had this?
Delaware Nature Society, I believe.
No, that's where I got it from. Swamp sunflower, marsh marigold, golden ragwort, blue flag, black-eyed Susans. Oh, Jiminy Crickets, I have black-eyed Susans and they just they take over. I love sweet scented Joe Pye weed. I just bought some more last year. Cardinal flower, scarlet bee balm also. For us here in Delaware, a great resource is regarding these. He actually cited the Mount Cuba, where he got a lot of this information from. He also got a lot from the Missouri Botanical Gardens, which was kind of random as well. But Mount Cuba Center here locally, regionally, was a great resource for that. So I've been saving it forever. Finally, I found a use for it. I'm so glad I had that for you today.
Good.
A couple of shrubs that jump to my mind are Fothergilla and Clefka.
Okay. Next question. A participant said that they rototilled my vegetable bed 5 years ago, put fresh compost on top of existing soil each spring. Is there a need to rototill the compost in? And same question for the raised vegetable bed.
It's my question. I want to
Okay.
know whether I can just put the compost about an inch on the top every year, or whether I have to rototill it in every year.
Claire, I do the same thing. I have my own compost and I spread it on my raised beds. And what I actually do is I don't rototill it, obviously, in a raised bed because it would destroy my raised beds. But I take a little bit of like a fork or something and just kind of work it into the top several inches of soil. And that will help improve the texture of the soil there. If you leave it on top, it will eventually, through rain and stuff, filter through. But it's a slower process. So I like to just kind of work it into the top. You don't need to really rototill it. Just mix it up with the top layer of soil. Anybody else?
What about the bed that's in the ground? It has a lot of clay underneath. The raised bed has no clay under it.
Oh, okay, that might be harder to work with. Yeah.
Yeah, the clay bed, I mean, it did have clay under it, and then that's the one we rototilled real hard.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely, if it's clayish, you might need to use something more.
But we've been putting compost every year for 5 to 10 years on top of it. So
oh, that's great. Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying, can I just put compost on top? I don't need to rototill it every year, or do I?
Well, you could turn it with a garden fork, which wouldn't be quite as injurious to the soil and what's living in the soil. Just lightly turn it with a garden fork.
Almost like aeration.
Yeah.
And Claire, your compost, is it so composted that it almost feels and looks and smells like regular soil? Because if it's that composted, it can be just spread regularly. What you want to worry about is if your compost is too fresh, it's not decomposed enough. You don't want to get that too close to your plants because it could possibly burn them. So you want to make sure that the compost is very, very well composted.
Oh, it is.
Okay, that's great.
My husband makes great compost.
Lucky you. Okay. What herbs or flowers should or can be interplanted among peppers, tomatoes, and cucumbers to help keep away pests and attract beneficial insects?
Cucumbers. They generally say, believe it or not, radish seeds. They'll help repel cucumber beetles. And don't plant cucumbers with potatoes. They actually have an antagonistic relationship. I don't know what the history is there, but they don't like each other. And cucumbers also do not grow well with aromatic herbs. I always plant marigolds as an insect repellent. I apologize, it's Benny the Bulldog, with my tomatoes, but I also like to plant basil with my tomatoes. I think it makes them taste better. Tomatoes are also compatible with chives, with onions, parsley, carrots. Cornell Cooperative Extension has a great companion guide that's about 5 pages. They say that tomato plants actually are good being planted with garlic because it protects them from red spider mites. And what was the other one? Peppers. Basil and sweet peppers go well together. I don't know what else you all think. Any other recommendations?
Yeah, I can say a couple of things about this too. Herbs are awesome to interplant with vegetables. I mean, in lots of ways. Not only do they provide some kinds of benefits, like Karen was saying, the basil helps the tomatoes and actually makes them have better flavor. But also, if you have any herbs that flower, they'll help attract pollinators to your vegetable plants. Another thing we were talking about cucumbers is nasturtiums will help repel squash bugs. And I get squash bugs on my cucumbers. I mean, it's not just cucumber beetles, it's squash bugs, and they will annihilate anything. I do not like those. Squash bugs and Japanese beetles are my mortal enemies. So those are great ones. So what was else to say? Marigolds are awesome to have anywhere in your garden. And the other thing about marigolds is that they actually have something in their roots that deter root knot nematodes, which will attack root crops and tomatoes. Tomatoes are susceptible to those. So marigolds and basil are both good to have near your tomato plants. I planted marigolds almost everywhere last year. That's why I have a big bucket of seeds that I saved. Sweet potatoes, I was having a problem with root knot nematodes, and I did plant marigolds, a couple marigolds in with my sweet potatoes. They do have to be, the roots do need to be in the same soil. So having a pot of marigolds next to that doesn't work. The roots have something in them that deters those root knot nematodes.
Follow-up question was also, why did my pepper plant only grow about 1 foot high last summer?
That sounds like a Karen question.
I'm the pepper lady.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't even eat that much pepper, but my son-in-law loves them. So there's a couple of things. If you're finding that you have a lot of growth, but you don't have any peppers, it could be related to weather conditions, either temperatures that are too high or too low, extremes, as well as prolonged cloudy weather. If you're finding that you have large plants and lots of flowers, but you don't get peppers, that could be due to a soil issue, meaning a need for a particular type of substance in the soil. So it would be advantageous to do a soil test as a nominal cost to that through your cooperative extension to see what is needed. I'll often say to people, you don't want to over fertilize, but you don't want to under fertilize, and you don't want to be spending a ton of money on fertilizer that you might not need. So just spend the money to get the soil test, and then you know exactly what's needed for your success. That would be my thought on that.
Now the plant only got about, it got 1 or 2 peppers on it, but it only got about 1 foot tall.
When did you plant
was-
it, Claire?
It was 2 or 3 of my plant. Out of 5 peppers, I think 3 of them only got a foot high.
Do you remember the date that you planted them? Because they are kind of slow growing. That's why we recommend that you start them, indoors early. So sometimes if you put them out too late, they just don't have that much time to grow. Do you
Oh,
remember when you planted them?
maybe it was too late. I didn't start them from seed. I bought plants, but I
Okay.
don't think I had them in the ground until late May or June.
How big were they when you bought them?
Probably 6-8 inches.
Okay.
They didn't grow much higher. They grew
Yeah.
maybe to a foot, maybe 14 inches.
It might have been too late. I plant mine probably the second week in May, weather permitting. I don't know. What do you think, Debbie? You grow peppers as well?
Yes, I grow peppers, and they grow really well here for some reason. We get so many of them. We stopped because we have so many in the freezer. But we do, sometimes they do, it depends on so many things, the weather and, are they getting enough sun? They like sun. They like a lot of sun. They, I haven't had a problem getting them to grow, but they aren't fast growers. They're not like going to get, 10 feet tall. So they do, it's a timing thing. I would say just make sure that you get, if you're buying your plants, get, some that are, I don't know, a little bit bigger if you can. And I mean, if you buy small plants earlier, you can keep them indoors and let them grow until it's time to put them outside. But just, the smaller they are when you plant them and the later you plant them, the less time they're going to have to mature.
Right. Yeah, they're also very sensitive to pH, which is another reason why I'm saying get the soil test.
Yeah.
Some people will put lime down, but again, you don't want to be doing that and affecting the pH if that's not what the issue is. What else did I want to say?
Okay.
Generally, they take 3 or 4 months of frost-free growing degree days, as we like to term them, to do well. So again, you want to put them out after the risk of frost has passed. And here I equate that, in my head, I equate that to sometime around Mother's Day in May.
So Karen,
Mhm.
which seeds do you use to grow peppers?
Oh, Jiminy Crickets. I've grown everything from jalapenos to bell peppers to habaneros to, I mean, you name it. I have grown it and really had great
From seeds?
success. Some from seed. Primarily, I'll start with the plants. So that's another thing to be mindful of if you're starting from a seedling that you've picked up at a local nursery or what have you. Be mindful of the specific type and their needs, because they are not necessarily all exactly the same. Also be mindful of, I've had problems with pests with my peppers some years, especially if I use a raised bed, especially if I'm using the same soil. I would not want to plant peppers in the same bed that I had previous years. I like to rotate them even within the raised beds.
Well, that could be my problem too.
Partially because of soil nutrients, partially because of pests. I had a problem with peppers one year and the beetles came back and I guess they had finished eating my eggplants, so they moved on to the peppers. And the following year, they just had a condominium complex built in my raised bed where they just didn't even bother with the eggplants. They went right for the peppers. And so what I was going to say originally was be mindful of look under the leaves. My kids think I'm nuts and I'm like, it looks beautiful. Look under the leaves when you're picking out your plants because a lot of bad bugaboos will hide underneath there.
Yeah. And definitely for you, Claire, I would definitely say don't plant peppers where you had them, this year. Don't plant them where you had them last year, just in case it is some kind of a soil-borne problem.
Actually,
I took my soil test up to the university last Saturday. So
Yeah, but that test won't tell you if you had something that, affected, a pepper specifically. But that's a good practice to always have, always rotate your crops, to help replenish your soil and to keep your disease numbers down.
I knew I
Right.
was supposed to do that with tomatoes. I didn't know that it mattered.
Well, your tomatoes, your peppers, and your eggplant are all basically in the same family. So if you planted the peppers there one year, you don't want to put the tomatoes there the next because you're just duplicating what you had planted the year before. You want an entirely different crop.
Yeah, they're all in the nightshade family.
Nightshades.
Ooh, that's
And
a
the
problem.
nightshades, you don't want to repeat nightshades in there because they're all susceptible to the same things. Also,
Okay.
another word about seeds is if you're thinking about starting peppers or tomatoes from seed now, you're getting to the point where
A
it might
little
be a
late.
better idea just to go to a nice, good gardening store and get plants instead. Because by the time those seeds get started, they're slow. Peppers and tomatoes and eggplant are slow to start indoors. And by the time they get big enough to put outside, at this point, it's going to be kind of getting too late. So I think in my opinion, the time for starting seeds indoors is a little bit past.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true.
Okay.
Can you plant cucumbers in the same place?
Yes, I believe so. There's a lot of crop rotation guides also online that you can, where you rotate them. So there's different, the different families of plants. So cucumbers are in the cucurbit family with squash and melons. So those you don't want to, all of those in that group, you don't want to plant in the same spot. Then you got your other group of in the cabbage family. So you don't want to keep planting those in the same spot. So you want to switch those things that are in the families of plants around. Does that make sense?
And there's
Okay,
also
we've
the
got
risk.
a couple more questions.
Yeah, watering, one last comment, and I'm sorry. Watering also can have an issue. If you're doing frequent light watering, it might encourage a weaker root system. So you want to be mindful of that process as well.
Oh,
But
we use soaker hoses when it's really hot, and we use them every other morning early, like for a couple hours in the morning early.
mhm.
Is that too much?
Well, it depends upon the type of soil you have. You know, the drainage with a raised bed is generally better than those that are in the ground, but there's a fine line between overwatering and underwatering. So I think I don't know, the way I was taught was pick up the soil and see if you can get a clump. And if it's that damp, then you're okay. Wait until the next day.
And Claire, using that compost and working that compost into that clay will help a lot with any water issues. It actually improves the soil and makes it drain better. So if you can, as much as you can get that compost into that clay, you'll improve the soil. And good soil has better drainage, and it will hold water and yet still drain.
And Karen, did you say not to plant aromatic herbs around cucumbers?
Is that what I said? What did I say? Cucumbers. Yes, I am told, and this is from the Cornell Cooperative Extension, which is kind of regional to Delaware. I like they have a lot of evidence-based sites. They're recommending that do not plant potatoes, and cucumbers do not do well with aromatic herbs. I don't plant cucumbers myself, so I couldn't tell you, but that's what they are recommending.
Okay, I have a question for Steve. How to control moss in the soil? It spreads like crazy. It covered my whole lawn and would not let the grass grow.
Moss is a product of moisture, shade, and kind of a lack of air in the soil. You can break it up, turn the soil. I mean, if you have conditions where it's so shady and you have so much moisture, that's where you're going to go. So you either give the area more light, or you try to cut down on the amount of moisture These are all, this is all what creates the conditions perfect for moss. Adding some organic matter should help in that regard. You say it covers the whole lawn. You must be in a very shady area. I don't mind it myself because it's green. If it is a problem that is so out of hand, there is a chemical. I hate to bring up chemicals, but there is a chemical that you could spray on it. Sulfuron, I think, available at most big box stores, and that'll get rid of it. But you really do need to attack the underlying conditions to give the areas more light, less moisture. You may be overwatering. Your soil needs to be broken up to aerate. You may have to do some things to aerate, get a scratcher to rake up those areas. So not knowing what kind of conditions or what kind of shade, I'm not sure. But again, mitigating the causes of moss, which is lack of light and high moisture content. If you can mitigate those, then the problem should get rid of itself. But that's as far as I can know, knowing the conditions that you have.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, another question back to vegetables. Can bush beans be transplanted?
That doesn't really work well with beans. Beans and peas. I mean, I've heard of people doing it, but I've never had any luck transplanting beans. They actually should be direct sown.
Okay. And I think it's the last question. I'm checking. Peas are grown indoors and they sprouted in 1 week and are spindly. Will they recover when planted outside?
Like I said, I don't see good results with things like peas and beans being started indoors. Ideally, they should have been planted out, like I say, maybe at the tail end of February, first part of March. They do better in the cold rather than being grown indoors. So I don't know if they're going to recover or not. I kind of doubt it.
Okay. I think that was the end of the questions that we got in the chat box. Are there any others?
I would just like to say thank you to the Master Gardener volunteers that agreed to do this. You guys are awesome, and without you, it would not be possible. You've provided some wonderful answers, and I just appreciate you, and I'm sure that the people that submitted questions do as well. So thank you very much.
And I just want to remind everybody that if you have further questions, we actually have a new email address. It's Kent County Helpline, right, Megan? Is that right? At gmail.com. So that's a good way to get us your questions directly to our helpers. And I'll send that out in the follow-up email along with any links that our presenters have collected during here and want to send to me so I can provide those to our participants. And see, is there anything else, guys, that we need to say? If you have further questions, just remember you can always email us. If you're in Delaware, you can call the helpline. I will send you that information in the follow-up email as well. And if there's not any last minute questions, let me put the evaluation link in here. I had everything ready before we started and then my computer failed me. So I have to go back and get this. And if you would not mind going and giving us a little review and tell us what kind of things you want. Next up, we had a lot of requests for workshops about individual vegetables. So we have that coming up starting April 8th. I'm going to be doing lettuce. Verna will be doing tomatoes the next week. Karen will be doing peppers. Linda will be doing squash. So we have some other vegetables coming up. So check that out. You can go to the link on that we provide you in the follow-up email for the Delaware State University website. We have a web page there, and it has not only the links to register for our future workshops, but also links to go back and watch anything you've missed, the virtual recordings that we have kind of library there, which are also, they're all YouTube videos actually. So if you wanted to go follow the Delaware State University YouTube channel, you can also get quick access to those recordings of the workshops if you're interested. And Megan, is there anything else?
No, great job, everyone. Thank you for participating, and thank you to the volunteers for helping. This was great.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very
Hope
much.
to see you virtually again until we can get back to our live things. This is our life. So
Great. So have a good weekend, everyone.
all right.
Bye.
Thanks for being here.